Hey everybody, what's up? Charlie back at Coffee and Cameras. We're here with Kate Schoenbach today. I've known Kate for a very long time. Kate was one of my former students back in New York City. So we're going in live with New York today. Kate, how's it going?
It's going good, Charlie. How are you? Nice to see you.
Thanks, you too. Doing good, thanks. And so, Kate, we go way back on here. We started with all these projects way back in New York. What are you working on nowadays?
Yeah, sure. So right now, I feel like I'm in the sort of marinating stage right now. So I don't have any active projects at the moment, but I'm kind of in the beginning of every year, I sort of look at my portfolio, see what I've done, where I want to go, and start coming up with projects to work on for the coming year. So that's where I'm at right now, sort of marinating and processing the upcoming projects. So I'm going to Northern California. I'm going to Northern California to visit some family at the end of the month. So I'm going to take that time to explore the redwoods and do a personal series, exploring family and exploration in some of our favorite places in Northern California. So that's upcoming. I'm also coming up with a few short documentaries that I'm going to be pitching to some of the editors that I work with. Those are bigger projects that I would expect to do kind of later in the year. So those are very nascent stages. But there's some within the sort of New York, Quebec region, sort of upstate New York, southern Quebec, that I'm working on, and also ones that are a bit farther out in the Himalayas.
Cool. Now, with your marination process, do you ever go back to old work to look at where you come from to see kind of where you're going in that process?
That's a good question. And yeah, I think that's exactly it, Charlie. I do a little bit of both. So I would say, yeah, I look back at the work that I've done in the past, what I liked about it, what I didn't like or would have wanted to do, improve upon. So it is reflective. I do look back at what I've done. And then I also think about where am I at right now and where do I want to go? And it's a little bit less maybe analytical than that reflective process. The sort of forward-looking process is more about feeling grounded in who I am and my own creative process. So that marination stage involves actually a lot of meditation, writing, free form writing. I don't know if you've ever heard of the book The Artist's Way.
Hmm.
Yeah, okay. So in that book they talk, I think her name's Julia Cameron.
Yeah, Julie
Yeah.
Cameron. Yep.
So, she talks about writing morning pages, and I've always kind of kept that process. Maybe not every morning, but I do try to have a morning routine where I'll meditate and just sort of free form write for about 3 pages. And that really helps me focus on like what's important to me. What do I want to get at? What stories do I want to share with the world? What stories are important to me? Like the California project that I'm going to be doing in a few weeks, that is a personal project or kind of like refine some of the techniques that I like, some of these more cinematic type shots that I've been playing around with recently and kind of can do that on a personal level that I can like share on my Instagram page. And then I would incorporate those sorts of techniques for like projects that I'll publish maybe later in the year.
Cool. And you said you're doing a little bit of video and you're also doing stills currently, correct?
Yeah, yeah, exactly. So I started off doing stills. As you know, many years ago, your class in New York was one of the first photography courses that I ever took. It may have been the first one, actually.
Oh, yeah.
I think so. When was like 2016,
Yeah, it's been a while. Yeah,
maybe?
almost 10 years. Woof.
My God, that's crazy. Yeah, wild. So I had been doing photography for a while, and then I was like, I want to take this, I want to level up. And then I think I took your class, took a couple classes like photo and then Photoshop, and then I did some classes at SVA. Anyway, but all this to say, I started out with you. So yeah, sorry, what was the question? It's
We're
not
talking about how you're
reminiscing.
going in for video versus stills
Yeah,
these days. And we're talking about how you started out in my class and it kind of spiraled out from there.
yeah, yeah, yeah. So yeah, it started out with stills, and I will always love stills. I think that's the heart of what I love to capture in my storytelling process. Like it's stills at the heart of everything. But now, and over the last few years, I've really been getting into filmmaking. So making short documentaries, like 3 to 5, sometimes 7 minute documentaries and explainer videos. Um, I'll publish those on occasion with published a couple with BBC Travel. I'm also a Getty contributor. Um, and a couple others. But I would say that is the direction that I'm moving towards, is eventually a feature length documentary. But I do love how, moving images can really convey a story in a way that stills can't. They can kind of complement each other. I do think that looking at stills in isolation are really powerful and evocative, but just, film in itself is just, it's a whole other dimension that I really love.
What do you think it is about film that draws you in versus stills?
It's really the whole process. Well, I think you can get a more well-rounded sort of education with a film. And when I say film, I've been making documentaries. So my documentaries are essentially educational in one way or another. And I think they're just more dynamic. So you have the visual component, you have the audio component, you have sometimes there's text if it's an explainer video, you'll have like subtitles or other text, informing the viewer of another element of that particular story. And so I think it just grabs you from all angles. And so I love that component, the very dynamic, well rounded educational component. I love filming. I love, being able to, visualize how do I want this scene to unravel. I mean, of course, it's documentary. You don't really script the whole thing, but you obviously have some ideas to like what sequence you might place in which sequence. So I think, yeah, I think also like even post production, I love editing. I love, adding audio and sound and music into a film. So I think it's really the whole thing. It's very dynamic.
What I'm kind of hearing, correct me if I'm wrong, but what I'm kind of hearing is you love the fact that it makes you think possibly more than stills. Is that correct?
Yeah, maybe feel as well.
Okay, cool.
So yeah, think and feel. Yeah, I think it draws out more emotion and more yeah, exactly, thought process than just stills alone. And I mean that's sort of true and it's not. I mean, if you have an incredible photograph, right? You're absolutely moved in a
Mhm.
way that you might not be if you just see some boring or not interesting explainer video. So it's not all the time, but I think that when a documentary, whether it's a shorter documentary or a full length feature. When I think it's done well, I think it's really powerful and a little bit more immersive.
There's a chance probably to go ahead and get somebody to feel on that versus like a still a little bit easier on there because you got all the elements of like the audio and then you got the movement and you got the lighting and you got the color grading and the editing and all that kind of stuff that comes to play too. These are things that we still have in still photography technically in some right, but we have a lot different experiences. We got a multi-dimensional experience, so to speak, with film on there, right?
Yeah, yeah, exactly. And I think you're also kind of seeing this play out in terms of people's preferences on, take Instagram, for example. And I know that we don't have much control over its algorithms, but I think that the content that we're seeing prioritized now more, it's obviously video content. It's been that way for a while. But even when people are, making stills or they're
Mhm.
posting stills, they're adding the audio on it. So you'll see a still with some music playing in the background, and that content seems to perform better. So I think that might be because the viewer, the Instagram user or whatever, is interested more in a more immersive experience, which I think you get with, let's say, even just a still paired with some music. So it's that audio component, the visual component that you obviously get with the documentary.
It's funny, we were talking about earlier to catch everybody up. We were talking about different social media platforms that are out there these days. I was mentioning that I've been experimenting with the TikTok and how I used to hate TikTok with all my soul. One day, just to give you a little bit of context, I was playing around with popular songs that were on TikTok. I put a popular song over one of my still images and it blew up. It got something like 800 views in a couple minutes or something like that. And then I put like a good old rock song or like a metal song or something I actually like, and it gets crickets. What do you think? What do you think about that for socials these days? What do you think about what these kids are doing out there?
Oh god, I don't know. I mean, I find it kind of annoying in a sense that we have to sort of develop our content around people's preferences, and in this instance, we're talking about like the younger generation, perhaps. Because I think as artists, we want to, or content creators, or whatever you want to call us, we want to create from the heart. We want to create what's meaningful and powerful to us and what resonates for us. And maybe that involves thinking about, the broader context of what other people are interested in. But for the most part, I think it stems from within. So when we have to start negotiating between our interests and our creativity and what's going to be received, you start altering your content, which is annoying, I think, because it's like you want your content to be received well. So you want to create something that's going to be received. But if you're adjusting your song because you're like, oh, well, this song is more meaningful to me, but I know this one's going to perform better, it's tough. I think it just reminds us, this process reminds us that we have to stay true to ourselves and to our goals. Because sure, and it comes down to like any generation. What do they say? Like, don't be a sellout. I mean, it's not. This is just a new way that this is manifested in terms of Instagram and tailoring your content to meet a particular algorithm so it performs better. Like back in the day, I remember before like Green Day became very popular, or like Blink 182, or think of those bands from like the 90s and early 2000s. They were people loved them when they were like in their like really grunge era, and then they became more mainstream, and people were like, oh, they sold out. They're such a sellout, man. They're not playing the music they used to. So it's the same concept, it's just a different manifestation. I think that concept is always gonna be there. Are you gonna sell out or are you not?
It's interesting because you could put it in the sellout bucket, but you can also put it in a different vehicle bucket, so to speak, as well. Because, like, I think about it this way: I've been doing these little tests on social media, so to speak, lately. Like, I'll put one up with the popular song, and then I'll put one up with my song, and I know obviously which one people are going to think performs better. But then if I get a partnership, for example, where some big company comes in and says, "Hey, Charlie, will you put one of your pictures on our brand?" I say, "Well, there's the thing I do for love, then there's the thing I do for money."
Right. Right, exactly. We have to balance of
Yeah, yeah, yeah. We got a balance for sure. And
yeah.
especially with nowadays with social media, like it's a necessary evil is the way I describe it to everybody I work with and stuff. It's like we can't get out there and get our work seen if we don't be on this stuff. What do you think about the future on there? Do you think social media is going to kick around for us as photographers and videographers? Or do you think it's going to go away eventually?
Social media?
Yeah.
I don't think it's gonna go away anytime soon. I think there was a time where I wished it would, and I wish we could go back to like the year, like something like 2000, 2001, like a little bit before Facebook. I think maybe like MySpace was out there. You didn't really use it. It didn't really matter, you know. But to your point, I think it's a necessary evil. I think that there's just too much money invested in these products. I don't think that the owners and or the shareholders are going to like let these products kind of go away. So I think they're just going to keep developing and changing these platforms themselves. And I think they can be useful to photographers, videographers, whatever content creator, even influencers. Whatever. I think that we just have to use them in a really mindful way. And I think it's harder to do that with social media because we can become so engrossed in social media that we're like scrolling for, my gosh, it's been an hour and I've been on Instagram. Like, what have I been doing? And nothing useful. So I think we just have to be really mindful as consumers of social media and content producers for social media. I don't think they're going away anytime soon. And I think we can draw inspiration from other people on Instagram to hone our own crafts. And I think, we always did that. We being content creators and artists, like going to a museum back in the day, or now, I see a piece of artwork that I love and I draw inspiration from that.
Hmm.
Now I go on Instagram and I see some photographs and I'm like, wow, I love this technique. This is really, really beautiful. I love this. I want to incorporate this into my sort of toolkit next time.
Hmm.
So I think we're just bombarded with more data, really, more than we ever were before. And so we just have to be mindful of paring back and limiting our use on there, and also when we are on social media, like using it very mindfully and conservatively. I think I don't think, and I say that in terms of time usage. I don't think we should be spending so much time, but a little bit is okay.
It feeds us what we call a digital echo chamber, is what I would call it on there. Because like whatever you put in that you like, it feeds you more of that to keep you there, basically using the product over time.
Yeah, when we're so siloed, right? Because what you see and what I see are totally different.
Yeah,
Maybe they're like not. Maybe they're a little similar, but then there's someone else who isn't a photographer, videographer. They're only into like, I don't know, political memes or, satire or 90s nostalgia. I don't know. I'm like making stuff up. There's all kinds of silos that I don't that are out there. So yeah, we're all viewing totally different content. And at the same time, there's like these overlaps where when they do overlap, it's nice to share things that resonate with each of us.
yeah.
uh, but I think it's just all about like not going down the rabbit hole, both as consumers and as content creators. Because we can, I remember I've spent like ages creating a reel. I'm like, my gosh. I remember I was like, where was I? I was in Europe this summer. I had a photography exhibit in the Netherlands, and I was going from the Netherlands to, I guess, France. Yeah. Yep. I was visiting a friend in Paris. Anyway, all that to say, I was like creating a reel and I kept losing connectivity. And then I kept pausing, and then I realized, gosh, I've been like trying to create this reel for an hour and a half. I was like, let me just wait till I get Wi-Fi, you know?
You're talking about journaling earlier. Like, I've been a big fan of journaling too, like doing the morning pages, the brain dump, whatever you want to call it and stuff. You're talking about Julia Cameron, which is great because she has like that book on there where you do your morning pages and stuff like that. I just do it freestyle now in notebooks on there as well. But one of my favorite things to write, and this kind of goes to my point on social media as well, is time to make the donuts when I finish my journal thing on the day. And it goes back to those old commercials from like the 80s and 90s or whatever it was back in the day. The guy gets up at like 6, 5, whatever in the morning and stuff like that. And he's just like, yeah, time to make the donuts. And then he advertises for Dunkin' Donuts, you know? And then, of
Okay.
course, you want donuts, you want coffee, whatever and stuff, because like you're fed that kind of stuff. And do you think on social media, do you think we're kind of fed in the same way, but in a new vehicle, so to speak, with our photography and our videos and stuff like that, or what we like? Do you think we're fed the same way?
When you say feel the same way, you mean like, are we comparing this to the commercial from the 90s?
Yeah,
Or
like back in the day, we had just television and we
mhm,
had like some show that we were wanting to watch or whatever and stuff like that. And then put the commercials between the shows. But now, like we search for a hashtag on social media, for example, and we search for photography in general. And then
yep.
all of a sudden they're inserting the commercials in between what we
Ah,
want to see on there again.
yeah, I do. I think it's very much the same way. I think it's advertising, and I think it's it just changed forms. I do think it is necessary though, because as much as I think we'd all love to not see ads. I think most of us can agree on that. We also don't want to pay for this. Like, you're not going to really use Instagram if you have to pay for it. Maybe, and there are paid services where you don't see ads. I mean, Spotify, for example, right? You can get the paid version and not hear the ads, right? So there's different business models, but I think if you're going to use a free service, it's got to get paid for somehow. So that's just the beast of the game. So yeah, I do think it's the same. Like, okay, so your whatever television channel you were watching, years ago, you're seeing the ads. We're seeing them here. It's the same sort of model, just manifested differently. Yeah, but I think as annoying as ads can be, there's been a couple where I'm like, okay, actually, I didn't know about this, or this looks so. I guess they did a good job marketing, but there's a couple out there that I'm okay, get it.
Yeah, every once in a while they get to you and you're just like, oh, I fell down the rabbit hole kind of thing, you know? It's like,
All about rabbit holes. I feel like it was different. So the difference I think between, let's say, the 90s and now, seeing advertisements, is that we had like one or maybe multiple TVs in the house, but there were certain times where things were on and that was it. Like, yeah, DVR came out and you could start recording, but for the most part, like if you shut off your TV, like you were done. You were done with screen time and that was it. You went out and played, you went out to school, you did whatever, and your screen time was really done. Now we're constantly surrounded by screens. I mean, it's like I'm looking at one right now, talking to you, at work, at we have these screens, and there's multiple monitors. Like, I think we're just bombarded with screens all the time. I mean, don't get me wrong, I like multiple monitors so I can edit work and on one
Mhm.
and something else on the other. I'm not complaining. But on our phones, it's like we never shut off. With social media, we almost never shut off. So I think it's really healthy to reduce social media time when possible. And we can set those little alarms on our phone, or Instagram has it tells you when you've been on for too long. So
On for too long, yeah.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
I just keep it within working hours, and then I don't look at it beyond that because I'm just like, "Nope, done for the day. Time for the family, all that good stuff on there, and just done."
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
You
yeah.
know, it's like, yeah. When you're thinking about projects, let me ask you this. When you're thinking about projects that you're coming up against and stuff like that, where you got to do a personal project, you ever think about what you could do with that personal project before you get into the project?
When you say what I could do with the project, in terms of like publishing, or what I could do just in general with it.
Yeah, like, what's your process? Do you think about the end game first, or do you think about creating the work first, or do you think about like something else completely different?
Sure, yeah. So I think with any project, or most of them, for example, the ones that are self-generated,
Hmm.
from within, come from stories that I think are really important, come from something that I feel I want to share or convey or learn more about through the camera. So they're always self-generated.
Hmm.
The process in terms of, then I think about endgame. There's some projects that I think, "Oh, wow, this would be great. Let me share this pitch." I come up with a pitch, and let me
Hmm.
share that with an editor, with a publication. Let's see if they're interested. So I have some of those for sure that are more end goal oriented, where I'm like, this is going to be a short doc. This is going to be a photo essay, and I'm going to develop this something that was self-generated into a proper publication.
Hmm.
There are some, like the one in California, where I think it's just very meaningful to me, and I don't think as much about the end game.
Hmm.
I just think, because I develop so many projects that are about the end game, I kind of want to have this as a personal project that's just for me. So I
Hmm.
don't have to think about the business side of it as much, and just let it be like my own meaningful story. And
Cool.
sometimes those photographs or, videos end up getting picked up. Like I did this piece for um, BBC Travel at the end of last year about, the best photo ops in New York City.
Hmm.
Some of those were photographs I had taken, a while ago, based on, just being a New York City street photographer. Oh, I love this composition. Let me shoot this. And they ended up picking it up years later. So, but those came from moments of like, oh, I just want to do this for myself. So that's kind of where I'm at with the California.
Cool. Yeah, you did a lot of stuff. You've obviously had your BBC on there and some great success. Congratulations on all that stuff on there as well.
Thanks.
As you get into your projects on there, like I remember when you were first talking about, to catch anybody up out there, Kate went to Namibia and documented the tribes in Namibia and the whole genocide and everything that happened on there. She's got a photo in the background from it.
Photo
Nice.
that's a little bit more of a, just a simple desert photo, not as much heavy content as you were talking about, but that was in Namibia.
Yep. But if I recall, that's actually what got you into stuff like BBC and like all these other publications and stuff like that. Is you started with a personal project that you believed in, and then you said, "Hey, after this, I'm going to pitch it to BBC. I'm going to pitch it like to all these different places on there, right?"
That's that's how I started out at the very, very beginning. So I had been doing photography, we'll say, for a while, and then yeah, and then I just had this calling where I felt like I really need to share this story. It was a story of yeah, genocide that had taken place in Namibia over 100 years ago, and I wanted to document the legacy of that. There had been some chatter in New York City, actually, about that particular event, and many of those people from that particular group were actually bringing Germany to trial in a court in New York. Germany was the perpetrator of this crime. Anyway, all this to say, these sort of events, the legal events that were taking place about the genocide in New York, were kind of coalescing with my interest in this particular topic. So I felt like this is a really good time to investigate this story and document the legacy of this. So that really stemmed from within.
Hmm.
And I went to Namibia. I didn't just go the next day. Like I prepped quite a
Hop a
bit.
plane and then
I was like, Charlie, this is a really big story. I really need you to help me pack my photography gear. I remember you helped me pack it.
I
Um,
remember that. Yeah, we had everything scattered
yeah,
out on the floor, and we're just like, "What light? What lens?" And
yeah.
I think you had like 50 lenses in the bag or something. I
Oh
said,
yeah.
"Just take a 50 or something, right?"
Ended up paring back quite a bit, but I was like, but I really want this LED, like, and I'm like, no, maybe we don't need this. Gonna be anyway. So we had this debate about what to bring. All that to say, I ended up going to Namibia a couple times. That first trip was really special because I was really able to open up with people. They were able to share their stories with me, and I was really grateful to give them a platform to do that. So it all, and I had really not done video at this time. I had done some video with you in New
Mhm,
York. We had done a little bit, but I really went from being a stills photographer to being in the field, literally in the desert, shooting video for the first time professionally. So this was huge. And also trying to capture people's stories that were just so important. The
mhm.
stories of their families during this awful time many years ago. Anyway, all that to say, that's how I started out. I came back, I sold some of that content to BBC, and that's what kind of got me going. And then from there, I had became like the Namibia go-to for a little bit. I did a couple more stories there. I came up again, I self-generated some stories, and then editors would say, "Hey, like, okay, you're going to do this story in Namibia. Can you also do one on this topic too?" I said, "Yeah, sure." So I think when you're coming up with a story, or when you're coming up with whether it's like a photo essay or a mini doc or whatever it is, it's nice to come up with multiple stories in a similar location so that way you can like leverage production, and it's
Mhm,
cheaper that way, sort of economies of scale, that kind of thing. Anyway,
mhm.
yeah, that's what got me started, was
Back in the day.
back in the day. Such a beautiful country, aside from some pretty awful human rights atrocities 100 years ago. It's now a very nice.
I actually forgot about that. Thanks for reminding me on there. Like, we were starting out, I was doing a book called Kinetic on there. I was doing dancers, and then you had come to me and said, "Hey, Charlie, I want to be like an intern. I want to follow you around and learn on multiple exposures, or long exposures, whatever." And so I put you to work on there, and I was giving you an assignment to go ahead and do behind the scenes video for me, I think, wasn't it?
Yes, exactly. I was
Yeah.
helping with behind the scenes, for it was Kinetic, exactly. So we would like go all around New York to like we spent a lot of time at Bethesda. Um, oh my gosh, Bethesda Fountain, Grand Central, like Central Park, other parts of Central Park besides Bethesda. Yeah, like all over, just documenting dancers. And yeah, you showed me the ropes in terms of like multiple exposures, strobe. Yeah, it was really fun, and doing some of the I think I shot video, for the first time with you. Um,
Yeah. Yeah,
so
yeah, yeah.
thank you.
It's fun because, yeah, you're welcome. It's fun because, like, I always say you never know where the road's gonna lead you. And, like, we go down these roads and we follow our gut, our heart, and head kind of thing, and then that leads us to where we need to be kind of thing.
Mhm.
Like, just you took the first step coming into class with me, and then obviously you took other classes along the way too. And then we come into the internship thing together, and then you got the inspiration from the stuff in New York with Namibia on there as well. And you go down there, and that leads you to BBC. And so the road's never like a straight line kind of thing. It just goes all over the map on there. But then when you think about where you're going next on there, like you always set like a trajectory, I think, right?
Yeah,
And so if you were to say like what your next trajectory is going to be, where do you see yourself going in like 5 years from now with these projects?
definitely full length documentaries. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, 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 absolutely. I love what I'm doing now. I love the photo essays and the short docs, the explainer videos, and all of that. But the next step is, feature length documentaries. That's where I really see myself. Yeah.
Cool. Are you gonna try to publish on just the internet? Or you gonna try to get into like theaters? You gonna try to do like small showings? Like, what is your goal?
Oh, I'd love no, theaters. Yeah, the bigger the better. I feel like you've gotta think big and shoot big and really go for it. What's the worst that's gonna happen? Okay, it doesn't work out well, then you tried, right? But I have a feeling like, you go with your heart, you connect with people, you come up with a good story, you get the resources together. It's all about production. It's like, what's the story? Is it interesting? Is it going to resonate? Okay, good. You've got one story. Now who's going to produce it? Like, you make sure that you have enough, videographers, filmmakers, people that are like going to really create, do you have someone to help you with post production, all of that, right? And then because I'd love to do it all myself, but I think you need a little bit of a bigger team. So you get all the pieces together, and of course distribution, right? You've got to make the pitch. So yeah, it's hard. I feel like I've pitched a lot of things that haven't gotten picked up, right? I think that can be, and for me it can be really self-defeating because I'm like, but this is such a good story. Like, I know the story's great. Like, what the heck? I get it. Oh yeah, I still get frustrated when like my stories don't get picked up, but when they do, and I'm like, oh yes, this is gonna be great, and I just want to keep making each one better than the last. And I feel like the future is I'd like to do that on a bigger scale. Expand my the production network. So right now when I go shooting these like short docs, it's like me and usually like one other person who
Mhm.
can assist in some way. It's usually like if I'm in one of these like very remote places, maybe a fixer and a translator, and like the fixer will help me with my bags, but it's really just me. So it's like me and one other person doing this. And so to do something bigger, you need to scale. And I think that's part of any job or any work, right? We kind of you start, smaller and you build up. And that's no different here. So yeah, I like to do docs,
There's a
bigger.
couple ideas I'm thinking about on there because I remember back in the day, you go, "Oh my God, I gotta get a malaria vaccination or something like that." I think you said to me, right?
Yes. Oh my
So,
God. Yeah. Yeah.
do you think the whole thing's like more of a journey than a destination kind of factor? Because like I remember we were talking about that, and you're like, "Okay, I gotta get the vaccination. I gotta figure out the gear," and then like you didn't know anything about Namibia before you went and kind of stuff. But now, like you're talking about making full feature docs on there, and you're talking about the whole process and stuff before you go down there. You're just like boom, 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 boom. And so, do
Yeah.
you think like the journey like defines you, or do you think it's like a more of a destination kind of thing? Or how do you feel about that?
That's a really good question. I think it's the journey. I just think like, yeah, there were times when you come out with your final product and it's out, it's really rewarding. But thinking about I'll call it behind the scenes because that's really what it is your journey. It's behind the scenes of your final production. I think it's so special, and there's so many fun stories that I've just encountered along the way from like packing with you, Charlie, like what lenses should I bring and all this for my sort of first real big trip. To just adventures along the way in Namibia. Gosh, I have so many fun stories like being in that desert actually, and you have to drive like it was like 200 kilometers just to get to like the entrance to this particular park, and then you have to drive like 40 kilometers on a bumpy dirt road, and then you have to get out there, and then you have to get in this sort of like off-roading ATV vehicle and go another 2 kilometers. Then you have to hike, like it's a schlep. And
Mhm.
I remember coming across this like local like Namibian guy, and he was going to take me from one point to the next, and he was like, "Oh, hello, miss." He's like, "You're American," and I'm like, "Yeah, American." He's like, "I know your president," and I was like, 2017. I was like, "My president? Really? You know him?" And he's like, I'm thinking like president of a company, and he's like, "Yeah." He whips out his phone, and he's like, "George and Laura were here 2 weeks ago." He has a picture with Laura Bush. She's like, "George took this picture." He's like, he's a painter now." I'm like, "This is the most amazing story." Like, we laughed about it. It was really fun and special. I would never have thought I'd meet someone that like just hung out with George and Laura Bush like in the middle of this desert.
Yeah.
So those like fun stories that I think really make up the whole package for me anyway.
Yeah, like the whole journey thing, like we're talking about, I think, right?
It's a journey. Yeah, I do think it's about the journey and 100%. Yeah.
It's funny because you're talking about how you had to schlep like 2 kilometers or whatever it was in the distance on there. And I just gently remind you, I should say, I won't go into this too much, but I remember you're like, I need the 24 to 70, I need the 200, I need like all these lenses on there. I was like, you have to hike that uphill both ways in the sand, you know? It's like,
I have learned to reduce my carry, we shall say. Yeah, I don't
yeah,
carry
yeah, yeah.
much. I now don't use the DSLRs. I use mirrorless. I've switched from Canon to Sony. So my pack is lighter now. Um, and yeah, I carry, much lighter. And honestly, like these, I'm so excited. I just got the new iPhone. And the video capabilities are amazing on here. So for some quick shots, like I can't wait to check that out. And that's a super light thing to carry. So yeah, it's all about minimizing devices, I think.
Yeah, sooner rather than later, you just be able to throw your phone in your pocket, got a little clip-on microphone and go or something, I think, you know?
I think, yeah, yeah. For some of the shorter stuff anyway. Yeah, I think it's okay to do that.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, it's been a long journey on there, and we aren't done yet for a long shot on there, you know? But as we get into projects on there, is there any type of advice that you would give to someone who's starting out for the first time? Like, what would you tell your younger self if you're starting out for the first time on there?
Don't beat yourself up so much. Just do keep going. I would say keep going. Really do what your heart is telling you to do. I think our intuition is usually right, and when you feel a particular story is important, go with it. Understand that sometimes it's not always the right time for that story, for example, but it doesn't mean that there's not more stories to be shared or to be photographed or to film if that's what someone is interested in. But I would say advice would just be, educate yourself on technique, educate yourself on the sort of process. There's so many resources out there, YouTube, Udemy, or obviously great classes with you, Charlie, or other folks that are teaching real classes. Educate yourself, don't beat yourself up, and just keep going.
That's some great advice right there for sure. I think like the continuation is the thing that everybody kind of fails to see sometimes because everybody's got the tunnel vision of the one thing.
Yep.
And then as we go forward on there, like continuing is one of the hardest and one of the easiest things in the same time on there. Because if we just get up every day and we take the camera out there and we make something, I think we're on the road. But like if you go out there and you're like, okay, I have to be popular on Instagram or I have to make like $1 million or whatever. I think everybody loses the sight on there, don't you think?
Oh my gosh, 100%. Get out of the Instagram mindset. If you want to do this, and I say this meaning creating art, creating photographs and video, forget Instagram. Like post your stuff. Absolutely. We want to share our work. We want to get feedback, but don't let that be your sort of litmus test unless you're just an influencer. And I say just like it's a different thing. But if your goal is to if your goal is to get followers, and I mean your primary goal is to get followers and money and just post things that are just, really snappy and popular right at the moment, then I think you're in a different category than what I am.
Mhm.
Do I want to get a lot of followers? 100%, but that's not my goal. Like I'm going to focus on art that I think is really meaningful, and then I'll post as a sort of secondary sort of feature of my work. It's not my primary goal, and other people might disagree with that. But for me, it's about my heart and what I love and what I want to share, and Instagram can optimize that however it wants.
I mean, quite frankly, I back you up on that. Like I've been coming about this a long ways, you know, too, because I had about a quarter of a million followers and I killed it all over the pandemic. But
Mm,
here's the thing: when you do something truly authentic, only then will people actually jump aboard. And to
mm,
do that, you have to believe in it yourself before anybody else jumps aboard too. I compare this to like applying for a job. Basically, you're talking about doing all these pitches, as you were saying on there. And
yep,
the more that you do, the more that you win. The less
yep,
that you do, the less that you win. Simple as that.
mm,
And I'll compare this too, because you're talking about getting into video from stills. Like I'm actually going to watercolor painting at the moment is one thing I'll announce to the world at the moment. Everybody can go out there and see this stuff. But anyways, watercolor painting is a different way to do this, and I'm more authentic in watercolor painting than I am in photography right now. And so if you make work that resounds with people, People find that. I've had more success in watercolor painting in a week than I've had in about a couple of years in photography, actually. And
Wow.
so you get into this sort of thing on there, like maybe your next trajectory is going to the video, and maybe you'll have a lot more success in the video than you had in stills on there. Maybe it'll lead you down a different road or different trajectory, so to speak, you know?
Yeah, I think it's all about I think it's all about growing, but yet staying true to yourself. And I think it's really important to remember to just do it for the right like do photography, take photos, make videos because you genuinely really want to. I think it's important not to get sidetracked with followers and this and that. I mean, it is important. We do want to build our brand. So
Mhm.
we I think it's smart to optimize, like, where possible, but again, it should be secondary to the work that you're creating, as you said, Charlie, you know, if it's authentic, the cream always rises, like, I think people will eventually catch on. It is, of course, a little bit of an algorithm game, like, you have to but at the same time, it's like, do you wanna be popular on Instagram or do you wanna be, like, in a gallery, you know? Sometimes people will only follow you or see your work because you're popular on Instagram, so it's certainly a balancing act, but I'm definitely of the mind that I think you should one should do it, do photography because they love it rather than for the followers alone.
There's that, and then there's also those people out there. I ain't gonna name y'all names out there, but I'm just gonna say there's those people that say, "Show me the money," and that's the only reason they're there.
Right, exactly, exactly. And don't get me wrong, like, we all wanna make money, I think we should, I think money is important, it's how it fuels our lives and our livelihoods, and it allows us to create art, but I think it's, like, shouldn't be the first thing, and if it is, then you're in a then we're in different categories, I think,
Different game altogether, yeah.
yeah, it's a different game, and there's no good or bad, just different, but I think for me, it's about creating something that's really meaningful, emotive, or educational, and that's where I
Nice. Well, Kate, thanks so much for joining me today on the series. I do appreciate it, and it's really great to catch up with you as well.
so great to catch up with you too, Charlie. I hope to see you sometime soon, and all the best.